Welcome to another episode of the Bamateur Hour podcast. Today is Thursday, April 3rd. I'm joined I'm joined by producer Scott and Will K. I'm Bama John, and today we're going to do the recap of the Alabama Duke game in the Elite Eight. So just to set up this matchup, Alabama definitely was one of the best 10 teams in the country. Duke was definitely one of the best four teams in the country. And as Alabama closed out the season, uh, losing to Tennessee was very fateful and was a bad situation when they lost that game in Knoxville because that probably cost Alabama being the number two seed and facing Houston in the Elite Eight. And instead, they got the bad draw being the number two seed in the East. And now as they advanced in the tournament, they ended up in the Elite Eight facing Duke. So really tough matchup. Duke came in with probably the best roster of all the teams in the tournament. They've got the most NBA players on their team of any of these rosters, and they have led by Cooper Flagg, who is the definitive number one draft pick, and who anybody who in the NBA, whichever NBA team ends up winning the lottery, they're going to draft him. Con Kniffel, who Alabama really wanted badly to be on this Alabama team, chose Duke over Alabama. And I can't blame him. If you can go play with Cooper Flagg versus playing with the Alabama roster, I would have picked Duke as well. And Duke is no shade, Scott, but Duke is definitely the most successful, the best college basketball program in the last 30 years. Better than Kentucky, better than North Carolina, better than Kansas. They've been the most successful. They did transition from Coach K, who our North Carolina Tar Heels sent packing in the Final Four, which Will K and I got the pleasure of watching Duke lose that game. That's another story for another day, but that was one of my finest moments ever at a live basketball game. But Duke was hands down the best roster, the best team for the season. But I will say that Duke won what was considered a very weak ACC. People were questioning how strong this Duke team was because they had a very weak schedule to play in the ACC. A lot of people thought they weren't battle tested. Interestingly enough, Duke lost to Kentucky, who Alabama beat three times this year. Duke lost to Kansas, and it was a very mediocre Kansas team. And then Duke lost to Clemson, who was ceremoniously dismissed from the tournament by McNeese State. So there was some real question about was this Duke team as good as people made them out to be? Auburn was the number one overall seed in the tournament. Duke was the number two seed. Florida was the number three seed. Houston, the number four seed. Tennessee, by beating Bama on a game that Alabama should have won, and they had Tennessee beaten. Because of that loss, Alabama drew the short straw and got to face Duke instead of facing Houston. And really, it was a really bad matchup for Alabama in this game. Duke rolled them 85-65. In the first half, Alabama was down 9 at half. Duke looked like the better team in the first half, and then Alabama really hung tough in the second half, even though I never felt like Duke was in danger of losing the game. And it was 65-57 with 8 minutes to go when Duke went on a 20-8 run to finish the game, close out Alabama. Good night, Irene. Bye bye, Alabama. Alabama was ceremoniously dismissed from the tournament, and Duke moves on to the Final Four. And they showed their dominance as they took control of that game. And Alabama just had no answers in that final stretch of how to close the gap, how to score baskets, how to shut Duke down. And scoring only 65 points for Alabama was a very bad offensive output. And their defense, for a lot of reasons, was not really able to effectively shut down Duke, get stops when they needed to. And Duke just showed they had better athleticism, better length, better size, better ability to execute, and was just the better team overall. If they played 10 times, could Alabama beat them once or twice? Maybe. Did Alabama probably play one of their poor performances of the season, yes, but I think Duke had a lot to do with that. And the other thing that I noticed this season is whenever Alabama had an A plus to a high level A performance, they always followed it up with the stinker. They did that when they rolled Texas and Austin. They followed up the next game with the stinker, losing to Auburn and playing poorly. When they rolled Kentucky in the SEC tournament, they followed that up with getting routed by Florida and ceremoniously dismissed from the SEC tournament. And unfortunately, Alabama probably played one of its best games of the season, but didn't have another one in its bag of tricks. They weren't able to do what they did against North Carolina in the previous season when they beat the number one seed North Carolina and went to the Final Four. Although I think this Alabama team is better than that Alabama team was last year, but they got a terrible draw having to face Duke. I think Alabama achieved what they should have this year, given kind of how they stack up against the top four seeds in the tournament. An Elite Eight performance was what they should have done. It would have been a big overachievement to have upset Duke, and it would have been an upset. Let's face it, guys, would have been an upset. Had they beaten Duke and made the Final Four, that would have been a big upset. And unfortunately for Alabama, I think Alabama matched up much better against Houston versus Tennessee. And I think Alabama could have beaten Houston and could have advanced to the Final Four, but then they would have had to play Duke again, and probably we would have had the same results. So that's my initial take on what happened, what I saw. There's a lot more to get into. Will K, thoughts, breakdown, comments, jump in.
Yeah, so Alabama doesn't play Duke very often in basketball, so I was optimistic before the game started. But when they got the tip and Cooper Flag was open from three, like wide open, nobody even on him, I was like, okay, this game's Jover. It's already Jover. And yeah, I mean, Cooper Flag, he had 9 boards, but and 16 points, but he didn't really take over the game. It was Knipple that really gave us struggles. Mark Sears didn't get a lot of good looks because their point guard is 6'6", and Mark Sears is listed at 6 feet. He might be closer to like my height, so I don't think I could score on somebody who's 6'6", given my just my size, and obviously I don't have the same skill set that Mark Sears does. But um, yeah, there was no. What was the closest we ever got it down to? 4, maybe. There was never a doubt. Duke. I don't know how they're not the number one seed. They, I think they're going to win it. Florida could beat them. I guess they could lose to Houston, but I don't see it happening. But I guess Florida could give them the most fits. But like you said, if we played Houston, we already beat Houston once this year. I know that was a long time ago, but um, I think in next year we need to get in the portal or recruiting or whatever. We need to get longer, taller people because people like Mark Sears and Aiden Holloway, they can make 3 pointers, but they're not very big in stature, and they're not great defensive players. I saw Mark Sears just let Cooper Flag make a layup. So I think that Alabama needs to do some soul searching this offseason because, like you said, even if we were to play Houston, all roads eventually would lead to Duke, and we would most likely lose. And that's where becoming a 1 seed really plays a big factor. You don't have to see them until the Final Four or the national championship game. So getting a 1 seed is very important. If we beat Tennessee, maybe win one other game, win that Ole Miss game, or even beat Florida, I think we're a 1 seed. So yeah, that's what I got.
I do think, Will K, that losing to Florida twice really hurt us. I think once we lost to Florida twice, We were out of the running of the 1 seed, so we needed to split with Florida if we wanted a 1 seed. But losing that game to Tennessee, because to me, playing Duke was deja vu all over again. I felt like we were playing UConn in the Final Four when we played Duke in the Elite Eight. I don't know if you guys both saw that, but I'm like, I've seen this movie before. Just put in UConn last year for Duke this year.
I
I
think
feel
we
like
played UConn better last year than we played Duke this year.
Well, I don't think we could have beaten that UConn team. I mean, and remember, we were within eight with 8 minutes to go, and the Duke just flexed their muscle and ran us out of the gym,
Yeah, but
and
it
it
felt
didn't
a little
feel
bit
that.
closer. I mean, I know
Yeah,
they ended up winning by 14, but I think that the first half that game was decently close. It was closer than anybody else came to beating UConn. I'm just saying we played UConn better than we played Duke this year.
well, I do think we were missing a player that's sitting out injured that would have helped in this game, and he helped us last year, and that's Reitzel.
Yeah.
I think Reitzel can create his own shot better than anybody on this team. He's a 40+% 3 point shooter. So when he got injured earlier in his career, I didn't really think we were going to miss him that much. I'm like, we got a lot of players. We got a lot of depth. I had belief in Phylon. I had belief that Sears and Holloway, that those guys could pick up the slack. I liked Youngblood shooting. But the thing that sets Reitzel apart to me from those other guys is I think he's very athletic. He's quick. He can create his own shot. And to me, and again, this was a problem. We kept taking the ball to the rack and getting our shots blocked by Flag and by Malawatch. And Malawatch was just a beast. And unlike Sears, when he pulled up for the game winner in Auburn, he refused to take some mid range shots. Holloway refused to take some mid range shots. I think Phylon hit a couple. Youngblood did not really take any mid range, and we couldn't get the ball at the rim and score, and our shots were getting altered or blocked. And so I think that really hurt us. But I mean, you're right that we played UConn a little bit better last year, losing by 14 than we did to Duke. But I really felt like I'd seen this movie before, and I didn't like the ending of either one of those. All right, producer Scott, jump in here. Come on, give us something.
Come on, Smiley. Um, First off, you guys are fading in and out, and I wonder if I have a connection problem. So if I fade in and out, it's the drugs. Anyway,
Will, am I fading in and out to you? Because I'm not hearing Will fade in and out. So it might be you, producer Scott, but I'm not hearing you fade in and out. Just for what it's worth.
Everybody sounds fine to me.
okay, well, we'll just let it go. And if it sounds like a, psychedelic recording at the end, we'll just leave it. Anyway, so where were we? Oh, the beatdown.
Yeah, your
Well,
comments.
my comments. Right out of the gates, like Will said, when Flag had that, I mean, it was an ocean in front of him. There were no defenders. It just poured that three in. I said, yeah, it's on. This is going to go how I think it is. And the biggest thing I noticed was the backdoor cuts. It looked like varsity versus JV in practice. It was embarrassing. I mean, Alabama got lavaed. They got burned all game by those backdoor cuts. And I want to blame the defensive effort, but in listening to you guys talk and just really reflecting, I mean, Duke's just bigger, better, stronger. And I didn't expect there to be that big a gap in the
All
talent.
right, hold on here a second. I'm gonna take it from here, Scott, and then I'll turn the floor back over to you. I agree with you. That was bad defensive effort. I think Phylon particularly got caught overplaying in the passing lanes and got juked backdoor. And I've seen him be guilty of that all season. I'm glad you brought that up because I've noted that. But Phylon, he's going to get crucified if he goes to the NBA if he doesn't clean that up. Because it was, to me, he got beat backdoor. Holloway did some too. I don't think Sears did as much, but I could be wrong. But to me, that is U man ball number one. Everybody, when you play basic basketball, U man ball. See the ball, see your man. Don't get beat on that backdoor cut. I mean, you're much better off letting him catch it out front and hoist a three than getting that Princeton cut to the back door. That was horrible. So I just wanted to chime in there. I agree with you. That was bad. And they probably got, what, 6 to 10 easy points off of that?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, Scott, back to you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and you guys were doing the fade, and my feelings are still hurt that I got cut off. So yeah, the back doors. There was a 7-0 run, 5 minutes into the game, and Duke's up 15-5, and right then, after
And
Flag's
by the way,
shot,
this run's
first
brought to you
shot, and
by
that
KO
I'm real
Peptade.
nervous, and still Alabama just found a way to keep it within 6 to 10 points, and there was a moment at 144, I guess it was in the first half, when Kniffel had his layup altered or blocked, and which he had been pouring things in all night like a Kool-Aid man. I mean, I couldn't believe he didn't score, and then we got the rebound, and he fouled our player, and to me, it's like a championship team at that moment, can cut the lead from 8 to go down and pop a 3 after that, man. Take some pride in what you're doing and cut the lead to 5, and in a blink of an eye, Duke's back up by 11. I guess a bright spot for me in the first half was Reed with what I call the St. Louis arch of a floating layup. I don't know if you guys remember that one. That was a pretty impressive shot, but that was kind of my only highlight there. So yeah, just outclassed. Duke just couldn't stop the cuts, and it's just the Clemson effect. I mean, people ragged out Clemson all those years they were active or did well in the football playoffs and won those 2 titles, and me included as an ACC guy. Oh, you didn't play anybody. Well, then you're well rested. You're kind of treating everything like a practice. No one's injured. You're confident, and Duke is just playing on a mission, and I don't see them losing.
Well, the one caveat I'll throw in there is, to me, Duke's the best team. Best of
Mm-hmm.
7, they beat all these teams. In the one and done, Cooper Flag goes down with the twisted ankle. Somebody gets in foul trouble. Someone comes in and just has an A-plus game of their life. Uh, you could have a Villanova beating Georgetown scenario, but I don't think that's that likely to happen. I think Duke's going to cut the nets down. I will at least win my bracket pool I'm in, which would be fun if Duke wins it all. I think I'll finish second or third if Florida cuts the nets down. If Houston or Auburn wins, I'm going to be out of the money. So at least I got some money I can gain if those hated Dukies cut the nets down. But Duke's the best team to me. Will K, any thoughts? You agree with that, or do you think Florida or Auburn can take them?
I think that Duke is the best team, and they will be favored for these next 2 games. I think the only team that has a chance to beat them is Florida. Um, you're a North Carolina guy, so you obviously hate Duke and don't want to see them win. I'm the same way about Auburn. If Auburn won a national championship game, that would be like my 9/11 because I wasn't alive for 9/11. That would be my own, you know. But I don't think Auburn can, even though they're the number one overall seed. Into the year, they lost 2 in a row, and then they lost in the SEC championship game. But yeah, I don't know. Um, I thought the same thing about the ACC argument that they haven't played anybody, their losses are not good losses, even though those are the best teams on their schedule. They lost to the best teams on their schedule. I was thinking, maybe we can get them, but no, they definitely showed that they're legit and that they're probably going to win it all.
Well, remember they worked Auburn pretty good when they played Auburn, so they did beat up on
I
Auburn in the regular
wouldn't
season.
say worked. It was pretty close.
You
Auburn
guys were
actually
so
do what?
so.
Hang on one second. Auburn
Yes,
jumped out on them. I think Auburn got up 10 in the first half, and then Duke ended up winning by 9 and flipped that game around pretty quickly. So, all right, producer Scott,
no,
I apologize.
no, that's I like it. Juice pause. Anyway, so I'm not. I don't. I put less stock in these early games. I mean, yeah, that does matter that the Auburn lost to Duke, but I don't. That's not why I think Duke will beat Auburn. I don't even care about. I don't care if Auburn beat them by 4 in that game. Duke's just excelled more. They've improved more, and they just haven't been beat up as much. So, and I can see it. I mean, they look fresh, crisp. They're just toying with people. and it's killing me. I can't stand it, but
Can't stand you. Can't stand you.
can't stand you. And but I'm gonna give Alabama some credit. I mean, I've heard you guys say they, oh, this was a stinker. They played bad. Yeah, and I will admit I didn't get to see the whole game, in full focus because of some obligations. But I mean, even at the 16:02 mark, had cut it to 7 again, and it like you said, John, it kind of fell off the rails, kind of like that Florida game, really late in the game, and Alabama's just so close. It's very disappointing. But yeah, Duke is better than I thought, and I agree. Will Florida seems to be the one team that knows how to man up. They can get punched in the gut and withstand it. And see that's what separates them. Alabama can't. When they get punched in the gut, they lose. So I'm going to be on my knees praying because otherwise there'll be a broken TV in the yard if the Blue Devils are cutting the nets down.
Now go ahead and order a new TV because I think it's going to happen.
Well, how'd you guys feel about? I always take these obscure notes. Duke quickly up by 10. Flag climbs the stairway to heaven and extinguishes Nelson's layup. Do you all remember that?
Yeah, I do.
How
And the
did he
one
get up that
saving
high? I mean,
the one saving grace is Nelson did block, and Will K had called this. Nelson did turn around block one of Flag's drives to the goal, so he got a little bit of revenge. But
Well,
I
I
mean,
didn't
Flag is
call it.
really good. Flag is really good.
I said that Grant Nelson was going to dunk on him, but I got close enough. He
and
did
then
it defensively. He
Diabate
dunked on
had
him
a.
defensively.
Did you all see Diabate's like from behind Dikembe Mutombo block on Flag? I mean, I'm grasping at straws for coming up with some joy out of this. Duke is
Well,
just incredible, man. I hate
they're
hearing
really
that.
really good, really good.
They're fast, they're tall. I mean, those backdoor cuts scare the crap out of me.
And
I can't.
people
I mean,
like
some of
to
them were
just,
bad, you know.
yeah, they just like to talk about Flag, but they have more than Flag. It's not just Flag.
Well, they start 3 top 15 draft picks, not one, and they're all freshmen. They got 3 freshmen who are going to be drafted in the top 15. I mean, that's a great roster. They've got other projected NBA players on their roster, and they got guys. Sion James is way underrated. I mean, they've got a loaded roster. And I think, Scott, to your point, Duke early in the season was starting 3 freshmen. It's no surprise that they've gotten better over the season because they've had to learn how to play together because it's a very different roster this year than what they had last year. And when you start 3 freshmen, even as good as those guys are, you've got to learn how to play together. So, I mean, they've really developed. I have to give John
That's a
Shire
good
credit. I
point.
mean, he's a great coach. I don't like him, but he's a great coach. And Nate Oates is a great coach. But Duke's roster, who on Alabama would start on Duke's team? That's my question to you guys. Is there anybody on Alabama's roster that would start on Duke's team?
Mark Sears.
You think so?
Yeah.
Scott?
He's a first team All American.
Yeah, but they made him look like
He's a
a
Wooden
mediocre
Award
player. Yeah,
finalist.
I know, but they didn't. He didn't look like an All American in that game.
Yeah, but he
Yeah,
wouldn't be playing against that team. He would be playing with them.
But if those guys shut him down like that, I mean, maybe he'd come off the bench and be the 6th man
Yeah,
or
but
the
he'd be
7th man.
practicing against them all the time, and then he'd know how to. I mean, he's gonna start anywhere. He's a Wooden Award finalist, and he's a first team All American.
Would you start him over Clayton Jr. for Florida at point guard?
I'd start them both.
Yeah. But that's just one of my questions. I mean, when I look at Duke, okay, maybe one Alabama player starts on that team. The rest are going to be second teamers. I just and that's great coach, great roster beats great coach. Really, really good roster. I don't think Alabama's roster is great. I think it's really, really good. I think Sears is the most likely high level NBA player on that team. Phylon, people project him as being an NBA player, but I don't think he's ready for the NBA. Phylon probably had one of the best games of any of the Alabama players. If we dig into the stats here, he probably had one of the best games of anybody against this Duke team, but he was not consistently good. Phylon, at least Sears credit, if he had a stinker of a game, it was 1 out of 6 games. Phylon seemed, that consistency was not there game in and game out. He could go out and score 25 points. He could come out and score 10 points, or he could, score 4 points. So I think that really you just ran into a buzzsaw. A great team.
Yeah.
I think this team is as good as either of those two UConn teams that won it a year ago and 2 years ago.
Do you think that the Brandon Miller team could beat this team?
At full strength and healthy, yes, I think they could. Well, they would have a better shot. Let's say that maybe that Brandon Miller team wins 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10, and that Brandon Miller team at full strength with the healthy Brandon Miller and Mark Sears would beat this Alabama team. I think they're better, but boy, this is a really good team.
Yeah.
Really, really good Duke team.
What's the best Duke team that you've seen since this team?
Do we really have to get into that conversation?
I'm just
I don't
curious.
I don't want to go down that road.
I'm just
Pro-
curious. I mean,
Probably
you said that they're
the
the best
Leitner.
historic program of all time.
Yeah,
So I mean,
it's great. I mean, Scott, don't you think it's the Leitner, Grant Hill, Bobby Hurley
You're not
buzzsaw?
you're gonna. I think it's this one, and I'm not the only one that said that. I'm just a peasant in the media world, but I've heard it on
no Grayson
ESPN.
Allen team.
I think this one. I mean, it's a different era for starters. It's hard to compare that Leitner one, but I don't think Leitner and what's his name Hurley and all that. Yeah, they'd be good, but this I don't know. This team is now these people are getting paid. They got better nutrition. They're probably getting better early in life. So if you factor all that in and put some handicaps in there, yeah, I would probably say the Leitner team, but it just raw talent and from what I've
Hey, you
seen,
never
this
know.
one,
Cooper Flag could end up like Jaleel Okafor. You ever hear people talk about Jaleel Okafor anymore? No, he sucked in the NBA.
yeah,
Well,
you may be
Cooper
right.
Flag, barring injuries, is not. He is that five-tool player. Cooper Flag's got the full package, and in the USA team that won the gold medal in the Olympics, if you listen to people talk about Cooper Flag scrimmaging against that team, he held his
Mm-hmm.
own. He held
Mm-hmm.
his own as a 17-year-old. Remember, he's only freaking 18. It's crazy. He's a surefire high level NBA player. He is going to be better in the NBA than Christian Laettner was. Now, Grant Hill was a great NBA player till his ankle gave out on him in his foot, and then he could never get right after that. But Cooper Flag, he's the full package. He can shoot threes, he can drive, he can dunk, play defense, he rebounds, he passes. He's got the full package. So I don't. I think he's as close to a surefire high level NBA player since LeBron James came out and went to the NBA. And Wembanyama, everybody's like, oh, that guy's going to be great. Well, he's already hurt. He's already got issues, and that tall, lanky, skinny body. Cooper Flag's built to hold up better if you look the way Cooper Flag's built. So, barring some catastrophic injury, I think he's a slam dunk 15-year, 5 to 10 time All Star player in the NBA. About as surefire a player that's come out since LeBron went in the draft. That's
Problem
my
is, he's gonna
take
go
on
to a
that.
really crappy team.
Well, that's how it always works.
Yeah, or you make that team really good.
Well, let's say you go to the Wizards. They suck again next year. They get another good draft pick, and all of a sudden the Wizards are good. But he's that kind of player. If let's say Charlotte ends up with Cooper Flag, and you put Cooper Flag on the same team with Brandon Miller and Lamelo Ball, all of a sudden that's a really good team. One
Yeah,
one player can make that much of a difference. So you put him on Utah and you pair him up with Markkinen. All of a sudden Utah's really good. So I think Flag he's a great player, but he doesn't make this team. this team, if they lose Flag, they're not cutting the nets down. But this team's great because they have the depth, the quality. They got multiple NBA players on that team, and it's really strong. And so, um, I think it's this team and the Leitner Hill team are the two best Duke teams ever. Those are the two best. But this team you can't crown them that unless they win the national championship. If they get beat by Houston and go home, or they get beat by Florida or Auburn in the finals, then you can't put them in that category as Leitner and Hill and Hurley, because they did it twice. They beat a juggernaut of a Las Vegas team. Some people think the refs kind of helped them out a little bit. There were some calls. Greg Anthony got in foul trouble on some ticky-tack calls, and then Duke was able to do their usual hand checking, shoving that they do and get away with it. But I do think for this Duke to be considered to that level, they got to cut the nets down.
Yep.
And that's true, because they had to go through Vegas, which will be no less than Duke going through Florida. I mean, I know Will's probably not even a thought at that point, but well, yeah, that's way before Will's time, right? I'm losing my mind here. When was that, John?
92, 91, 92.
Okay. Yeah, I can remember watching those games, but Vegas was legit. I mean, that was like an NBA team.
Well, and that Kentucky team that they got lucky to beat on that last second buzzer team, that was a great Kentucky team. Jamal Mashburn and all those other Rick Pitino, that was they got lucky to survive that game and win that second national championship. And then they beat the Fab Five and they beat a really good Indiana team. They had to have some luck to get it done. And the first year that they won it, Carolina beat them by 30 in the ACC tournament, stomped them, and then Carolina loses to Kansas in just a weird game, and Dean Smith gets thrown out, and Kansas plays Duke in that final, and Duke wins their first of two as they go back to back. So I'm
Well,
not bitter about that
well,
one at
let's not
all.
forget too. Will, you may not remember this just because it isn't important, because it's not a win, but they got beat by 30 in the finals the year before by Vegas. 30
Correct. Without
in
without
90.
Grant Hill,
Yeah.
but they got.
So that, yeah, I think as a package, John, you're right. Now that I put all of those 3 years together, that one to me is more meaningful. But if they had to play this team, ooh, I might be going with this one this year.
That would be must see TV to see that happen. That'd be a great game. I wouldn't like it, but
Well, I like
I
how college basketball has gotten so much better, because then you think about the 2010 Blue Devils, and I just, they're not as good as the Grant Hill team or this one. So it's fun to watch.
Is that the
well,
one
I wanted
where,
to. Hey guys, I wanted to jump into a couple of stats here that I think we're telling. It just shows Duke's defense and Alabama's offensive woes. Alabama shot 35% from the field. I mean, just pathetic. Shot 25% from three, as there were a lot of clanging of those threes. They kept hoisting them up, but I don't think they had a lot of open looks. The one thing Alabama did do is they were 11 from 14 from the free throw line, but it just didn't matter because Duke was so efficient, shot 53% from the field, shot 46% from three, and then they had 19 free throws, and Alabama only had 11. So I mean, just dominating on both ends in terms of Duke shot better, scored the ball better, did everything better than Alabama. And Duke out rebounds Alabama 38-27. Um, and it was just here's some crazy numbers from me. Terrible shooting by Alabama. Mo Diabate was 2 for 6. Sears was 2 for 12. Holloway was 2 for 8 as Alabama shot 23 for 65. Duke had 4 players in double figures. You had Con Kniffel, 21. Tyrese Proctor had 17. Flag had 16. And then Malawach had 14. And a lot of those were on alley-oop dunks as Kniffel, Proctor drove the basket. Even Flag did and threw up alley-oops. And Malawach just went up and got it and
Mm,
put it to him
hmm
pretty hard. So those stats are telling. But again, they were within 8 points at that key stretch in the second half, and then Duke just shut the door on them. So some thoughts there.
And a real funny thing too, I thought this even back when some of those blowouts where Alabama looked like the NBA team. Oh, we have too many turnovers. I cannot stand that obsession. Well, what happened, John, in this game? Alabama had 10, Duke had 13. Did it matter? Uh-uh. So
It,
that's
it
my
was it was
hot take.
bad.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
just don't
it
think
was
the
bad.
turnovers matter. That if you have a lot of turnovers, you might be doing something really good. So, and it's just that's the byproduct of it. So, anyway, yeah, it was a beatdown.
And a funny thing about Duke only had 3 block shots, which is kind of surprising. Alabama actually had 5 blocks, but Malawatch and Flag, I just felt like our shots were altered, even if they weren't blocked. And again, failure to shoot the mid range. It's better to shoot an open or a decent look in the mid range than to get your shot altered and inability to finish at the rim. And we've harped on this over and over again. Alabama's big men just didn't have post moves to finish at the rim and to deal with tough defense at the rim, and they weren't effective at it. And I think we have good mid-range shooters, but just the Nate Oates style of coaching, he coaches against that. And even though he claims he didn't want his players, he didn't want Holloway, he didn't want Sears, he didn't want Phylon, he didn't want Youngblood just heaving up those shots at the rim that he called bad shots that were contested. They're so drilled to either shoot threes or go to the rim that they weren't pulling up. And Oates said that he told them they needed to take more mid-range shots rather than getting their shots altered and having to struggle with the length of Duke. But it was a complete failure in an ability to hit mid-range shots, and I think that was going to be the key in this game. Is they had to hit some tough mid-range shots and also take open mid-range, and they wouldn't do it. So I give them an F for that.
I think that they consider floaters to be mid range. That's the only quote unquote mid range shots that they'll take. Well, Baron Philon, he'll do a floater. Mark Shears will hit a floater. Sometimes Youngblood does, but they don't take just jump shots from inside that 3 point line.
I saw
Maybe they
one
do
in
on
this.
accident, but they're
Yeah, I
trying to
saw
shoot a
one.
three.
It's a great point. I literally counted one of what you just described. Mark Sears did that at 2:11 in the first half to cut it to 8. A traditional mid-range jumper. That's it. Didn't see any others.
And about the floaters, I don't remember them taking many mid-range floaters. How did Mark Sears win the Auburn game? Mid-range floater. How did he win that? Why didn't he take more of those? Because he can hit them. Holloway can hit them. Again, why didn't he do it? Phylon. And I just think it was that stubbornness. And also, when you're coached not to take mid-range shots, even if your coach tells you to start doing it, it's hard to change a habit.
Programming. You're
And
right.
you're not, if your coach is against it, you're not practicing that shot in practice. So you might be able to hit them, or you might not be able to hit them because you just don't practice that shot at all. So that's probably why.
And you didn't need them all year until the end.
And Nate Oates is recruiting guys who don't really do that. He's recruiting 3 point shooters.
Well, and here's another thought. If Nate Oates had had the Duke team and Shire had the Bama team, would the result have been the same?
I think Duke might have still won, but by less.
I agree with that.
You think Shire, if he was coaching Alabama? Okay, no, you're saying Nate Oates would have won with the Duke roster. Okay.
I'm saying the
But by
talented Duke would
less.
still win.
Yeah, that's a blind spot. I mean, I sort of the big men at the 10 that's just a skill problem. But what you're describing is a blind spot. He's got to change that. That's ridiculous. That the three of us can see it. The three amigos can see it, and Nathaniel can't see it.
Well, Nate Oates is he was a math teacher So he's all about statistics. So he doesn't think that a mid-range shot is very efficient. That's his reasoning.
And you know what my comeback is to that? Is an open mid-range shot better than a shot being altered at the rim, or better than a highly contested three-point shot? And I'm
It's a
not
good
saying
shot if
take a
it's
lot of
open.
mid-range shots, but right, if you have an open shot or you have that floater, and you can, and they were struggling to get shots at the rim or at the three. So the only area where I thought they could have done more was that. And so when I think about Nate Oates, I think there's three blind spots that Oates, if he wants to cut the nets down, number one, he's got to get a roster that's a little bit better than this, because this roster is just not as good as Florida's, just not as good as Auburn's, even though they beat Auburn. Credit to that. Just not as good as Duke's, particularly. Three blind spots. His out of bounds plays. He cannot have those out of bounds issues. I still saw him struggle in the tournament at times to get the ball in bounds. That's a blind spot. Number two, in big games against highly talented teams, you're going to have to hit big mid range shots when you can't get to the rim and you're contested at the three. We saw when BYU let us have open threes, we killed them. Had they contested the threes more, how would that game have gone? Had they come over the screens and said, we're not going to let Alabama shoot the threes, we're going to force them to pass it off and not give them that, how would that have played out? It would have been interesting had they chosen a different way to defend the three and to defend the pick and roll. So that's the second area, the blind spot. And then the third area that Scott and I talk about repeatedly is developing post play. Nate Oates, to me, needs to go hire a coach that is a post play specialist and teach his big men how, when they get the ball in the post and they're being defended, how to get off shots and score in those positions. And I think those are the three weaknesses that if he wants to cut the nets down, he's going to have to address them and do a better job.
Yep.
Yup.
Well, if we're at the yup stage of this podcast, all right, Will K, parting shots, final thoughts as we wrap this podcast up.
Yeah, so going into next year, I think that Nate Oates needs to really go into the portal. I haven't looked at what he's done recruiting out of high school. I need to look at that, but the transfer portal is such a huge asset now. Anybody can go anywhere if you have the right amount of money. So I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like next year. Losing Sears, losing Cliff, losing Grant, need to stock back up. There's a lot of turnover in basketball because people can leave as a freshman, as opposed to football. You have to wait 3 years so you can kind of build a roster and get people developed. But basketball, you could just have a bunch of Cooper flags, and then the next year you don't know what you're doing. So a lot of reflection needs to happen because we're getting close, but you have to be Duke, not go through Duke. So in order to do that, you got to have a lot of talent. So that's what I'll say.
Producer Scott, final thoughts.
As
Final
a
Jeopardy.
as a newbie, boom, 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 boom. As a newbie to this Tideland, I do think this team, to me, is more impressive than what I saw last year. Obviously, until Grant took them over the hump in the NCAA tournament. But switching gears, do we think Houston will do better against Duke than Alabama did, and maybe even just get some home cooking lucky, just out of their mind play, and maybe Duke has some sort of letdown since it's essentially a home game?
I do think that Houston will lose to Duke by less than Alabama does if that constitutes playing better.
I think it's a contrast to styles. I think Houston rebounds like crazy. They play defense like crazy. They're very athletic. I expect that to be a close game. I don't think Duke's going to beat them double digits. Duke may win by 5, 8, but I think Houston can upset them if the right things happen. So yes, I like Houston's chances, and it's a real contrast to styles. And I think Duke was very comfortable trying playing Alabama, given the way Alabama likes to play. Duke had the right anecdote. And again, I would say we matched up better against Houston And I felt like we could have beaten Houston versus Tennessee was a poor version of Houston. I thought Houston and Tennessee were very, very similar teams. And Tennessee and Rick Barnes proved that he's not a big time coach. Rick Barnes, very good coach, can get teams in the top 10. I don't think he's ever going to cut the nets down. If he proved me wrong, I'd be happy for him. I like the guy, but it was just a bad matchup of styles for us against Duke. And I think Tennessee might have matched up better against Duke than we did, just given the way they play and the ferocity of the way they play defense. Maybe not, but I think Houston's going to fare better.
And Auburn's going to lose. That's all that matters.
Unless Tahad Pettiford goes wild, and unless Baker Mazar keeps it under wraps and plays high quality and doesn't get tossed.
And, of course, Janai Broom.
As long as he's healthy, do we know what his health status is?
I'm sure he'll play. They're not going to sit him.
Producer Scott, any other thoughts?
I've never had a thought. I just read off a teleprompter. So no, I have no mas.
All right, gentlemen, I think that's going to wrap up this episode. We will return again sometime in the next few days, and we'll do a full recap of the season, come back, talk about who won the national championship, talk about the turnover in Alabama's roster, the attempts to rebuild the roster and come up with another top 10 team. I thought it was a great season for Alabama. I thought they really had a really high quality season. I mean, when you make the Elite Eight, that's a great season. Unfortunately, they ran into a buzzsaw, and the SEC was also loaded. And I felt like that Auburn and Florida were better than Alabama. That doesn't mean Alabama wasn't a great team this year. They were definitely a top 6 team. Um, I would say Alabama's maybe better than Houston. I would have liked to see them play to see who would win the rematch, and we beat them once this year. Um, so I think from that aspect, great season. We're going to wrap this up until we have our next episode. This has been the Bamateur Hour with Will K, producer Scott. I'm Bama John. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Tide.
High Tide.
Tide Pod.
That'll wrap it up.